Hi everyone, it's Rachel back with Shades of Orange, and today I'm here to do another video. This time I'm going to be recommending middle grade or children's horror. Now, for the most part, I do try to focus my channel on adult fiction, but when it comes to horror, I do enjoy kind of dabbling in the other age categories just because I like to see what they do with the common tropes of horror and how they take concepts that can be scary at any age and just what they do with it. So I'm hoping this video will be a good resource for parents and people with young children in their life that maybe want to get into reading scary books or want to introduce them to the horror genre, as well as for people like myself who enjoy reading at the different age levels and want to try out middle grade horror. Maybe you don't know where to go, or maybe you've read some of the really buzzy classics and are looking for more recommendations. So hopefully there'll be something in this video for everyone. I'm going to be discussing which ones have the most all ages appeal and which ones I would more recommend for younger audience. All that being said, I have 10 books to talk about, and before we get into it, I do want to mention that none of these books are Goosebumps, not because I don't recommend them, but just because at the time of recording this, I've only read one Goosebumps book, and I just don't feel like enough of an expert on the series in order to tell you where to start. I never read them growing up, and I just think there's other booktubers out there that can probably give you better recommendations on that series. But obviously, if you're looking to get into middle grade horror, Goosebumps is an excellent place to start. It got so many people into the genre, but I'm going to recommend 10 other books that fall into the middle grade or children's category. Okay, now let's get into the books themselves. First up is one of my favorites on this list, and that is Small Spaces by Katherine Arden. This follows a young, precocious girl who finds a book and reads a story and then goes on a field trip that seems to reenact the story that she read the previous night. They are on this field trip to this farm, and her, along with her newfound friends, have to survive the smiling man who is out to get them. This story is very fall in terms of a setting. It's very atmospheric, so perfect to read around Halloween. And I'll say that it was genuinely pretty scary. It involves some scarecrows, which are just really creepy things. And I really like the main character. She was very likable. She is a bookworm. She is super smart and good at math. And you do have a story where she has a father who is very active in the story himself. He's very likable and lovable and loves to bake. And I think that this book is really good at capturing what makes middle grade stories so good, and that is their focus on family and friendships. And yeah, this one is a good balance of a feel-good story, but also recently creepy, and definitely one that I do think appeals to all ages. I really enjoyed it, even reading it as an adult. Next, I do want to sneak in a horror classic, and that is Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark by Alvin Schwartz. This is a collection of horror short stories written for children, so it is on the younger side of the books on this list, but I think that this is a really good story to read with children. So even if your kids are a little bit older, if they're open to reading with their parents still, this is a good one to check out. You, of course, do want to do the illustrated version, and specifically the original illustrated version, because I learned from my own reading that there actually are different artists that have redone this collection. But go find the original, and it's remarkably creepy, again, given the fact that it is for such a young age group. I think it has a lot of all ages appeal. It's not going to scare you if you're someone who reads the scariest horror books out there written for adults, but in terms of being reasonably creepy, this one definitely works, especially with the artwork. So a lot of fun. It is a more popular, well-known classic, but it's definitely not one to miss. I also want to talk about Spirit Hunters by Ellen O. This follows a young girl that moves into a new house with her parents and her younger brother. Soon enough, her younger brother starts to act strange and do some bad things. He blames the young boy or voice that he is hearing in his room. His sister naturally is worried for him and goes to seek help to get her brother out of the situation that he has found himself in. This is a story that blends together a haunted house narrative with a possession story, which is one of my favorites. And what I like so much about this story was the fact that it brings in a diverse element to it. The young girl is biracial, one of her parents is Korean, and the culture, the food, and those various aspects are woven into the story in a natural way that really, I thought, brought something new to the story that I don't see in some of the more classic versions of children's horror. And I really did enjoy the possession aspect. With possession, of course, comes the possibility of an exorcism. And I like that once again, they found a diverse way to tackle this because they didn't go through the Catholic Church, but instead found another means of trying to get the ghost out. So definitely want to recommend, definitely one that will appeal to people of all ages. And again, it just felt fresh, it was funny, and at the same time, I thought it was reasonably creepy. I did the audiobook version and I thought the narrator did a great job with her creepy kid voice. So definitely another one to recommend. Next we have City of Ghosts by Victoria Schwab, which follows a young girl that is traveling around the world with her parents. They have a TV show deal to work as paranormal investigators trying to find proof of ghosts in all of these old haunted places. Little do they know that their own young daughter actually has a connection to the dead. She is able to see ghosts and actually has a ghost best friend who follows her around. And of course, when they go to these old haunted places, she also encounters other ghosts, which may or may not be friendly. This is a great story that is really focused around childhood friendships because so much of the story involves her and her ghost best friend. In terms of scariness, this one really wasn't scary at all for me. I think that it almost walks the line between urban fantasy and horror because again, the main ghost in the story is very friendly, but it was cute, it was likable. I enjoyed the main character. She's very obsessed with Harry Potter, and there's a lot of Harry Potter references, which might be too much for some readers. I thought it was fun. And if you're into those kind of stories, I would recommend it. It definitely reads like middle grade, but I do think it's written in a way that's smart and entertaining for most readers. As long as you're open to middle grade, you can pick this one up as an adult for sure. Next, I want to talk about The Forgotten Girl by India Hale Brown, and this follows a young African-American girl who wanders outside with her best friend and they stumble upon an unmarked grave site, and they soon find out that back in time in this small town there was a grave site where people who were Black were buried because they were not allowed to be buried in the main graveyard. And so as a school project, she takes on to find out who these people are, and this is partially spurred on from the fact that at night she is possibly seeing a ghost of a young girl who is asking her to find her identity, to find out who this forgotten girl is. Now, this book is technically classified as horror because it involves a ghost, but yet again, this is one that I'll say is not scary. The girl that appears is not terrifying in any way, and I don't think that this book does a lot in terms of being suspenseful. It does have a nice atmosphere, but that's more of a wintry atmosphere because it all takes place during the snowy months, and that is kind of woven into the story is the snow spirits. But in terms of the story, what I liked most about it was those diverse elements because I think it really highlighted some of the nuances of being a young Black girl going to school, feeling different, standing out, and trying to fit in. And I like that because it definitely gave me a different perspective as a white Caucasian person myself. So I like those aspects and definitely would recommend it as a good story. But in terms of horror, if you're looking for a creepy story, you're not really going to find it with this one. But if you're interested in the topic, if you're interested in diverse horror, this again is an excellent choice to pick up. Next we have Doll Bones by Holly Black, which follows a group of 3 best friends that like to play imaginary games together. They get pulled into an adventure when one of the young girls believes that her China doll is talking to her. This doll is saying that she is actually made from the bones of a girl that was murdered years ago and is now asking her to help find out what happened and uncover the truth. This is a story that I will say reads more like older middle grade, almost reaching young adult, but not quite. The children are older and there is a tiny bit of romance, and in terms of their friendships and also their relationships with their parents, it's a lot more complicated. So in a lot of the other stories I mentioned, there's a strong focus on friendship, but it's just celebrating friendship. This one actually has tensions both between the children and their parents and also between the friend group. They are getting older and starting to grow apart and are trying to decide whether or not they need to give up their imaginary play. So I think that this one will most appeal to an older audience, so I wouldn't give this to really young kids. But in terms of the creepiness, this one actually delivered pretty good. Most of the story is more fantastical, again, revolving around those imaginary play elements. But what made the book creepy to me was the actual premise, because the idea is that the doll was made from the bones of this murdered girl that were ground up and turned into her. And the actual description of having that be done was really disturbing and in concept, yeah, quite frightening. So I do think that this book has some creepiness to it. It's dark, it's nuanced, and again, it's not so perfect black and white, but instead shows a really realistic picture of relationships. And if you're interested in a more complex middle grade story, especially as an adult reader, I do recommend this one. I quite enjoyed it, and I thought it was quite satisfying in terms of a story. Next we have Thornhill by Pam Shmee, which follows two girls over two different timelines. In the 1980s, we follow a young girl who is an orphan and living in the foster care program. Right at the beginning of the story, one of the other girls that used to live in the house with her has come back. She is quite upset by this because that other girl was bullying her, and once again the bullying starts up. The story is also told from the perspective of a girl in the present day who is investigating the house where this foster program happened, and the present day story is actually only told in pictures, which is very unique. I've never seen a book with a narrative like this because it gives you all the information you need to know what is happening, but there are no words or no descriptions. This book is at times very familiar in terms of a narrative. I think we've read a lot of children's fiction about orphans and girls that are unliked or, just not necessarily part of the cool group, and this girl also struggles from being selectively mute, and so she is very quiet, and you more get the story in this very quiet, intimate way told from her perspective. And so this is a book that I did find creepy in different ways. I think that the unique narrative really worked, and I also think that the ending of the story was actually quite disturbing in a way that you wouldn't expect. I will say it's almost more disturbing reading it as an adult when you actually realize what the author is saying and what actually happened to the young girl living in this house. I thought it was quite dark. So I don't know if younger readers will pick up on those nuances, but I do think that this book, despite how short it is, because it is really short, especially with the pictured chapters, but I would recommend it to adults if you're open to the genre. It's so unique, it's so different, you will fly through it, and hopefully you will love it as much as I did. Next we have Skeleton Man by Joseph Brock, which follows a young girl whose parents have disappeared, and so she has to go live with her mysterious uncle, and he is just very weird. He never eats. He locks her away in her room, and it's a very creepy premise to a book. This is one that honestly did read much more for a younger audience. It did feel very juvenile to me, and I did struggle to connect with this one as much as the others. It is written by an Own Voices Indigenous author, and so I like those aspects to the story, but I don't think it has as much appeal to an adult audience. But if you have children, if you're looking to bring in again a diverse book into your home, this is one you might want to check out. Even given that description, it wasn't as creepy as I wanted, but again, I think a lot of that had to do with reading it as an older person and just not connecting with the story quite as much as I want to, but still want to mention it here. I do think that other younger readers will definitely pick up and enjoy the story a little bit more than I did. Next, we have One for Sorrow by Mary Downing Hahn. This is a piece of historical fiction that is set during the First World War in America and follows a young girl who moves into a new place and so has to start school. She is trying to make friends, and at first she catches the attention of the very unpopular girl in the class. She reluctantly hangs out with her and then eventually ditches her to go hang out and become friends with the more popular girls in school. They tease and bully this unpopular girl who is pretty unlikable, but you still are sympathetic as the reader to her position. You find out that she maybe doesn't have the best home life. She's possibly not the most physically attractive by common standards, and soon enough, she actually gets sick because this story also takes place during the flu pandemic. So she gets sick and actually dies. Not a spoiler, it's in the synopsis, but possibly comes back to haunt the girls that bullied her. This is a book I really did enjoy for a few reasons. One being the fact that it focuses again on young friendship, particularly female friendship, but it addresses the fact that girls can be very mean, and that starts at a very young age. Often I don't see these plot lines handled or done in such a way until the books reach young adult level, but I think that this happens a lot sooner in elementary school, and this book highlights how mean girls can be to each other. And in terms of creepiness, it wasn't overly scary, but it was very enjoyable to see how the ghost was taking her revenge. And I also liked the historical aspects to the story because it's really not a time period that I read about a lot. And this book was just very enjoyable to read, very engrossing, and I do think it would work for someone at pretty much any age. If you're open to reading middle grade, I definitely think that this could work as an adult reader, or again, a book to read with your younger children. Last, I can't make this video without talking about another one of my all-time favorite middle grade horror books, and that is Coraline by Neil Gaiman, which is about a young girl that moves into an old house with her parents. She discovers a doorway that leads to another side of the house, which is basically like her house again, but inside it there is other mother and other father, which are basically clones of her parents, except their eyes have been replaced by buttons, and they want her to come stay with them forever, which involves changing her eyes to buttons as well. This book is remarkably creepy. It's also very nuanced and funny. I definitely think that Neil Gaiman did a great job of writing a lot of little tidbits in the story that younger readers may not pick up on, but is very funny or hilarious even to an older audience. But at the same time, while I say that this book is funny or will make you smile and is cute, it's also very creepy. I thought it was very disturbing and just has a really good sense of atmosphere. So if you're looking for a just solid piece of middle grade horror that is decently creepy, regardless of your age, is just a good story, again, regardless of your age, definitely recommend this one. Highly recommend the audiobook version because it's narrated by Neil Gaiman himself, who does a phenomenal job. So of all the books on this list, this one is my favorite, but of course I do recommend all 10. So that's it for this video. I hope you found it helpful. I'd love to know down below which of these books you're most interested in picking up yourself, as well as recommend me your favorite middle grade or children's horror books, because I would love to keep reading the genre or age category. And if I read enough, I would be happy to come back with a part 2 to this video. So again, thank you for watching. If you're new to my channel, consider subscribing. I do read a lot of horror, although mostly adult, as well as thrillers, science fiction, and fantasy. You can also help me out by sharing this video around online or with other friends and family that are looking for recommendations for middle grade stories. And you can also give this video a thumbs up or hit that notification bell so that you never miss another video. Thanks so much for watching. Talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.